So back in the summer of 2023, when Taeyong's first mini album was released and there was a lot of autograph signings, I did tell him then that I'm writing a book on K-pop fandom. And I asked him, so I'm going to dedicate the book to you. And he's like, oh, that's so nice. 너무 좋아요. And I said, well, do you want it to be, to TY or to Taeyong or to Kyung, which is like his nickname from the fandom? And he's like thinking really hard. It's like, hold on. His cute face was all like scrunched up. He's like, well, wouldn't Tu Taeyong be best? Because, that's my real name. And I'm like, okay, so now I know what's going to be on the first page of my book. For this book, it was the first idol who got me into K-pop and the current idol that I love and who I follow around the world helped me, motivated me to finish the book because I wanted to show them and I wanted to tell them I finished this book on K-pop fandom, and it's the first English language academic book on K-pop fandom for you. Of course, that's not true. It's not for you. It's for my students. We are here today at the Asia Center at Arizona State University. My name is Areum Jeong. I'm a professor in Korean Studies at Arizona State University. And I am here today with three of the best and brightest of ASU to talk about my new book, K-pop Fandom. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Professor Will Hedberg and also Chan Nguyen, who runs the Asia Center, for their generosity in hosting us today. Would you like to introduce yourselves a little bit about who you are, what your major is? You could also mention your K-pop bias.
Yeah, I'll go first. I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Jessica Stevens. I am a film major at ASU, and I'm also minoring in Korean. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to you today more in depth about your book and also just K-pop because I also am a lover of K-pop. My personal favorite groups are ATs and Stray Kids.
Wonderful. Okay. My name is Nicole. I'm majoring in biological science. Very excited to be here. I read the book and I loved it. I personally love TXT, love my man Hyun Kai. And yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, you can't see this, but Nicole is making the hearts with her hands. So imagine, Nicole making the hearts. Yes.
All right, and then I'm Daniel Nguyen. My major is psychology at ASU. Me personally, my favorite groups are like Twice, Idol, and also A-Pink. And then I'm really excited to talk about the book. I've been super into K-pop and like about how like the fandoms and like all that run the whole system. So I'm really excited to be here and talk about this with you.
Yeah, and we all met through my classes at the School of International Letters and Cultures. I think you all took the Korean pop culture class. Uh, Nicole and Daniel also took the Korean literature class, where we studied some of the most important pieces of Korean literature from the colonial period up to today. Jessica also took the Korean film and literature class and also the Korean film directors class. So, because naturally she's a film major and she's now an expert in Korean film. And you all also take Korean language classes, I believe, to some level 101, 102, 201, like 201, 100 level. Yes. So, yes, we have some of the best and brightest of ASU who is also interested in Korean culture and K-pop as well.
Absolutely. I think I don't know, I can't speak for Daniel and Nicole, but I can say for myself, Korean culture is something that really pulls you in. I know I personally started through the language because of K-pop, and it was just really intriguing, and I wanted to be able to understand it on my own. So I started learning the language, but then as you learn the language, you learn more about the cultural background. So then it interests you to take the classes. And for whoever listens to this, if you get the chance to take any of the Korean language classes or or cultural classes, you'll have the best time. Our teachers are fantastic, and the content is so stimulating and interesting that you can't not pull something out of it.
Absolutely. I've even talked to people in our other classes who didn't get into K-pop as early as we did. And they even said to me, they're like, yeah, like I'm super interested in being in class actually. And they're like, I've learned a lot of things about how like the business and like the industry works. I'm like, that's really interesting that you took the class not knowing about it. And we still able to gain knowledge. Yeah, have how much knowledge.
I especially like after taking like your classes, I would always like go home and tell my friends. So it's like now every semester they're looking for classes to take in the Korean, especially with you.
And I also learn from the students because I know this stuff, but I also get to see how you're receiving, how you're interpreting Korean culture. So that's also very helpful for me as well as I prepare my classes. So let's dive into the book. For those of you who are listening who have no idea about what my book is, a little bit about myself. I've been a K-pop fan since I was a very, very little girl. Before the word K-pop even existed. Back then, we just called it 대중가요, which literally means popular music. Um, and I never imagined that I would one day teach a class on K-pop, much less, write a whole book on it. So imagine my surprise, some, 20 something years later, many moons later, not that old though. When I see Psy's Gangnam Style becoming viral all over the world, and then K-pop groups such as BTS rising to fame in the mid 2010s, winning awards from Teen Choices, Billboards, etc., and just taking over the world. And then now we have K-pop Demon Hunters winning the Grammy, the Oscar, and maybe even something more like Emmys or something. So yes, I do think it's a very good time to be talking about K-pop. But my book mostly looks at the changes in K-pop fandom in the past 30 years. And I look at how fan practices really do influence the industry, but it's also looked down on because most of it is performed by young women. And they do it for free because they love the music, they love the idols, they want to see them succeed. And so they perform all this invisible labor, which is probably why it's looked down on. And so I try to trace the history of K-pop fandom and the labor that fans perform. And I look at a variety of fan activities. Some of them, our students might have participated in. Some of them might be new things. So yeah, that's mainly what my book is about. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the book or the writing process or what I feel about K-pop.
I think I have a question to start, and I think it's probably it's kind of similar to what you answered, right? It's like why this book, but not just like why this book. It's also like because in your book you actually have your own personal experiences, all your fun little anecdotes, which are actually quite hilarious. But why did you feel like that was a necessary thing to add in to this book instead of just more of an actual statistical background of kind of the past into the present and the change? Like, why did you feel it was important to add these anecdotes?
That's a great question. So after I got my PhD in 2015, that was roughly coinciding with the time, BTS was rising in fame. And also a lot of universities were interested in installing classes on Korean popular culture. And so I was teaching this class on East Asian media and performance at UC Santa Barbara. And I included some, days on K-pop. And I had all these readings that I would assign to my class on the globalization of K-pop or government policies or the changes in the industries. But those were fine, wonderful pieces of research. But I couldn't find a lot of articles on fan culture that I liked because a lot of them, as you said, were mostly, quantitative research. So there's a lot of empirical research, a lot of data, statistics, which is all fine, but it felt very dry. And coming from, from where I'm standing as a fan, K-pop fandom is a place where you have all these feelings of, happiness, disappointment, excitement, deliriousness, delusion, even a little bit, anger, all these emotions that you experience as a fan. And although it could be, difficult to capture all of that in a piece of writing in an article, I also wanted my students to see what it's like to be a fan, even though, it might be difficult to understand it through just by reading an article. But, and so I thought there has to be something about fan culture that really grasps the fan experience. But I couldn't really find a lot. And I think that's mainly because a lot of folks who got into K-pop after Psy's Gangnam Style craze or as BTS was rising to fame. And so they actually didn't have any experience being a K-pop fan previous to all what they see in the media. And because I come from a very different place, looking at things from the inside to the outside, whereas they're looking at stuff from the outside to the inside, I decided that, well, it's good that we have all these articles on data and statistics, but there also has to be something that captures the insider fans experience. And so I decided, okay, well then maybe I should write what I want to read in class. And so that's when I started writing roughly from 2018. And then it took like 6 years, I guess, to finish the full manuscript and then send it to the press, go through reviews and then, revise it a bit, and then through the publication process. And now it's out. I'm also very grateful to my publisher, the University of Michigan Press, for having the option to publish it open access so that it's completely free for viewing online. One of the main goals I wanted for this book to be as accessible as possible. The platform should be accessible for anybody who wants to read and learn about K-pop fandom. I also wanted to write in a very accessible way, so I tried very hard not to be too jargony. I mean, of course, sometimes you have to use big words or jargon to explain a concept, but after you use that word, you should always explain what it means. So I also tried very hard to make the writing accessible as possible. And so, yeah, that's why I included the fan experience, because I really do think we go through all these emotions as a fan. And although it's hard to, put all of that on paper, I could at least try and, deliver the things that we experience as a fan.
I honestly really liked, because when I was reading it, if there was any like concepts that were like I haven't heard of before, you did a really good job being like thorough with it. And then and yeah, I honestly had a question because while I was reading, you were also talking about like idol fandom culture and how it's ridiculed. And I was gonna ask if like after like looking more into it, do you think there's been a change in the way K-pop and idol fandom culture is viewed, or do you think it's still kind of ridiculed the same? And like, why do you think that probably like happens?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for the longest time, I mean, I still think it's looked down on and ridiculed to a degree because, unlike men's hobbies like basketball, football, baseball, uh, lining up at Comic Con, they're not ridiculed, and people don't question why are you lining up in front of the main hall at Comic Con, 24 hours before the event begins. Why are you all decked in blue jerseys to cheer for a basketball game? Why do you have face paint on to cheer for this football game? But nobody questions them. But for women's hobbies are always questioned, and the legitimacy, the validity of women's hobbies. And I think K-pop has always been looked down and ridiculed, especially before K-pop became very popular outside of Korea. Even today, even if K-pop is a global sensation, people still look down on it because the major demographic of the fandom consists of younger women from teens to 30s. Although the demographic, the way I see it, is changing to include a lot more diverse genders, ethnic and economic backgrounds, it still is viewed as, a group of screaming young girls brainwashed by the industry. There was a turning point very recently in December 2024 when South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law, and the martial law troops rushed to the National Assembly to arrest the opposition party leaders and everything. The first thing that young women in 20s and 30s did was to take to the streets, march the streets, And because the majority of them were also K-pop fans, they brought their K-pop light sticks to the streets to call out former President Yoon Suk-yeol and martial law. And it was a huge moment because the elder generation was bemoaning that, oh, younger generation, they don't care about politics. They don't care about South Korea or democracy. But when they saw a huge number of 2030s young women marching the streets with their light sticks and including K-pop songs to the traditional protest anthems, they were so moved. They were so impressed and happy that the younger generation were fighting for democracy. And so it was a turning point because the media was very interested in why these young people were doing this. And, so many of these women, young women, and their light sticks garnered a lot of attention on South Korean media. And so it was a turning point, but at the same time, I have conflicted feelings because it also erases all the stuff that young women did prior to this protest. Young women has always been at the forefront of activism and political events in Korea. And so if you're only paying attention to the Yoon protests of December 2024, it means that you really haven't been paying attention to what young women did prior to that. And you're erasing a lot of their activities and labor. So I feel conflicted about that. It's great that now, more Koreans are recognizing that, oh, K-pop fandom is not just a group of screaming young girls. They're actually, very intelligent, critical young people who are reflexive of their actions. They all get together with collective goals. But at the same time, it also means that they haven't been paying attention. And actually, some of them still aren't paying attention. Great question. Yeah.
So before you said, like K-pop fans have always been seen as like crazy, the fangirls and all that. I want to talk about not like the double standard almost, but almost. So like the male fans are almost always catered to with the female idols, with the infantilization and all that. And then as soon as the male idols do it, they are always scrutinized versus the female idols don't really get much talked about. They're just like, oh, that's just part of the concept. So it's just asking, like, where do you think like the line is drawn between like, oh, like one of it is just fan service versus the other is like going a little bit too far, too extreme?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think a lot of it stems from cultural differences, especially with Korean fans and non-Korean fans. And also a lot of it has to do with the parasocial relationship that I talk about in my book. So we also talked about a little bit in my class about parasocial relationships as these imaginary relationships that the viewer forms with the media figure, or it could be an imaginary figure like Harry Potter or Katniss Everdeen. But anyway, you feel like you know this person, and that's why you have this imaginary relationship in your head. Now, previously, scholars have defined this as a one-way relationship between the viewer and the imaginary figure. There's no way of the celebrity or the imaginary figure reciprocating that emotion. But the way I see it today, it's not one way, but also not entirely two-way, but maybe kind of like 1.5 way, or it could be seen as an asymmetric two-way relationship. Because nowadays with social media platforms, with live streams, sometimes you do see, fans interacting with idols or idols interacting with fans directly. And so I do think also that the concept of parasocial relationship is changing with the development of digital media and tech. And especially for K-pop, the biggest difference I see with K-pop and other music industries outside of Korea is that K-pop idols will tell you what they ate for lunch and dinner, and they'll tell you to sleep well and have a good day. Now, Queen Taylor Swift doesn't do that. As much as I love her, she's not going to tell me what she ate or, to sleep well. But that's because K-pop idols perform emotional labor almost 24/7 through live streams or these, chat apps called Bubble where they, converse with their fans. And through these, constant communication, these live streams, social media posts, and, chat messages, fans develop a parasocial relationship and they feel like they know these idols really, really well. And some of these fans have been invested in these idols from their very early training days, especially if they were on programs like Produce 101, which is very akin to something like, I guess kind of like American Idol. It's an audition program in Korea. A lot of trainees compete on that TV show, and eventually only 10 of them can make their debut as an idol. And so anyway, some fans have been invested in these idols since their very early days. They, buy albums, stream music. They, keep track of all their social media activities. And they're very invested in their growth and success. And they have witnessed their growth and success. And so these fans feel that, oh, but we're the biggest supporters. We helped you become this big superstar. And so you have to pay back. It's kind of like an invisible transaction. You have to reciprocate that by being a good person. In Korea, being an idol is not just being a talented musician. You have to be a cultural ambassador for your nation. You have to be obedient to your elders, kind to your colleagues and juniors. Do not litter on the streets. Do not drive under influence. Don't do drugs. Don't go clubbing. Don't smoke. Don't date. Pay your taxes well. Very important reasoning. Pay your taxes well, if you know what I mean. You have to do all these things. You have to be a morally good person, in addition to being a talented singer and dancer. And so there's a lot of expectations on these idols' shoulders. And so that's why I think there's this cultural difference that arises when, for example, when a K-pop idol claims to be dating somebody publicly, then a lot of Korean fans, especially East Asian fans, are angry because we have invested all of our time and effort and money and our love for you to become this big superstar. And this is how you pay back, by frittering your time away, dating, and not focusing on your career. And that's why you oftentimes see articles about fans protesting or sending protest trucks to management agencies, whereas a lot of fans outside of Korea might actually be happy for them. Oh, wow, yeah, this person works really hard. I'm happy that this person found somebody to love. And so I think a lot of that stems from cultural differences. And that also goes with not just dating, but also for scandals. Because in Korea, your image has to be pristine. If you fall from a scandal, there's almost no coming back, except there is a double standard. It's easier for male celebrities to bounce back once, that scandal is kind of faded from public memory. But especially here in the US, I feel, let's say somebody got in trouble, went to rehab, cleaned up his act, and came back. People would applaud because you cleaned up your act, because you're doing better, you're trying to better yourself. There's a chance at redemption, right? But in Korea, that narrative doesn't fly. So I do think there's cultural differences stemming from, I guess, the fans' investment, their effort, but also the differences in which parasocial relationships work in different contexts.
Mm-hmm. I think like piggybacking off of what you just said and Daniel's question, I think another question comes into play of like, for people who may or may not know K-pop, idols are the artists, and they're known as idols, but they're also known to be perfect, which, in my opinion, there's no such thing as perfection, but that's besides the point. But like, there's this heavy precedent of these idols have to be perfect, and so they do an incredible amount of training, incredible amount of straining for their own personal lives, on top of all of the pressure that they have on their shoulders of being, a good person and like all these moral things that they have to be guided to. And on top of that, there's the parasocial relationship, which is not just like freely given. Idols don't necessarily want to tell you what they ate for lunch and dinner when they're going to bed and if they're working out today. Like, they don't necessarily want to be that open and honest with people who they may or may not have ever met before in their life. Yet their company kind of forces that on them to continue to grow their status. So I'm curious as to, do you think, I guess I have to figure out how to word it, but like, do you think the focus on perfection as well as the force of parasocial relationship is one reason why it causes people to look and scrutinize women so much, because it seems like they're just now this obsessed, crazed person rather than somebody who's just like genuinely caring for another person. Kind of, again, it can kind of fall into cultural differences, right? Like us in America, we can really love an artist, but we may not be as like looked down upon for being like, oh, I saw them do this. That was so sweet. Like Zendaya and Tom Holland, right? Like we all know, like they might have got married, possibly, most likely, 100%.
Or was it an 8?
Really, but like, you know what I mean? Like we're all invested in that, but it's like it's not force of the like you can't be invested in this. Whereas like for K-pop, it's like people look down on it. It's like you really shouldn't be doing this. You're 20 something, 30 something. Like go to work. You know what I mean? So what do you think about that? Like, do you think that adds to it, or do you think it's just like a part of it? That makes sense.
That's a great question. One thing I always think about is the vicious loop between the fandom and the industry. Yes, the industry creates all these resources like, live streaming platforms, bubble, chat messages, platforms where idols converse with their fans. And then they feed it to the fans. And of course, fans will use it. They will, be happy with it. And then their fervor and enthusiasm, their manpower motivates the industry to create more cutting edge resources. And then, of course, the fans use it. And then they create more stages. So it's kind of like a vicious loop where I see it's not a one-way street. I do see how fandom collectively influences the industry, and the industry feeds on that and then creates more things that's prioritizing capitalism, monetization. But again, fans will use that. It's kind of a vicious loop. And I'm thinking about how there is one common thing that I see in K-pop and here is that the more authentic the artist is, the more people will love it because it's like you see this perfect, you know, perfect picture crafted side on stage, but then behind the scenes, you also see a glimpse of who this person is as a human being. And that's why we love authenticity. And you often see that here too, especially, let's say, for example, we all say that Taylor Swift's music is very authentic, motivated from her own life, her own stories. She composes and writes everything. It's very authentic. At the same time, K-pop artists also perform a lot of intimacy. And so you have to be very intimate with your fans and that you have to be constantly communicating with your fans in addition to being very authentic. And so I always think the biggest difference between K-pop and other music industries is the idea of authenticity and intimacy and how that always has to be hand in hand. And I think in a way, because idols are very intimate with their fans and fans believe that they know their idols 100%. Yes, I know this person, what this person likes to eat, hates to eat, their hobbies, their vices, their pet peeves. I know everything. I think because they think they know everything, that also drives them to be more controlling in a way. I also do think this control part of it comes really from love. I do think these fans sometimes really do mean well. They want to see the artist succeed, but at the same time, sometimes their controlling can be a bit too much, especially when they're prohibiting the idols from dating, from having romantic relationships, or even other things, when they're body shaming the idols, or even within the fandom where, there are conversations about something like race or cultural appropriation or sexuality. And that could be just, shoved under the rug because it hurts the image of the artist, because it's not for the greater good. And so that's why I think these kind of issues arise in K-pop. And I think we also talked one point in class how if K-pop wants to become bigger, or if it wants to continue its popularity, it has to be more inclusive. And we should be allowed to have these kind of discussions about race or gender or cultural appropriation or misogyny for it to become better. And we also talked about how it's okay to critique something, even if you love it. Actually, if you love it, you should be talking about it and critiquing it more so it could become better. But I still think we're a very long way from doing that. I mean, there are some folks, some idols who are addressing these issues, especially issues such as LGBTQ issues, gender, misogyny. There are some idols who, for example, wrote misogynist songs, but they're trying to do better. And so I think that's also important, not to stigmatize or villainize someone too much when they made a mistake, but also see what they do with their mistakes. Are they trying to do better? Are they trying to educate themselves and learn from their mistakes?
I would say one thing that kind of reminded me of is like in your class, we would talk about like, since now a lot of us like know kind of what goes on behind the scenes, I wanted to ask you, do you think since knowing a lot more of like what happens behind the scenes with these idols and like the K-pop fandoms and like the culture in general, do you think your experience as a fan has changed while growing up? And like, has there been any like negative things that have like led you astray from it and any positive things that tell you like, oh, okay, I like it here?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing I've noticed is how everything is so capitalist today. I mentioned in my book, back in first gen in the 90s, not everything was about money. You could go to fan events, you could go to autograph signings for free. You just had to get up really early in the morning and just line up for hours. But everything was free. You didn't have to buy tens of hundreds of the same album to get into an event like today. And everything is so monetized today, down to where I saw a company selling the concert confetti.
Oh,
Yeah, and I was like, okay, we have now reached the point where you're selling concert confetti, literally the plops, yeah, literally the paper that's flying from the sky. It's like dirty and shriveled. And so I do see how the industry has had kind of had a turning point, I think, between second and third gen in the early 2010s, when they realized, oh, we could actually monetize everything, and became this neoliberal capitalist machine, and how it encourages so much overspending and consumption, even with merchandise. In first gen, there actually wasn't much merchandise getting released from official channels, which is why we made a lot of fan art, because there wasn't merchandise. So we would make our own pencil cases or pin buttons, or little things, trinkets for each other to share. And that still exists today. There's still a lot of fan art, a lot of especially freebies being shared at concert venues. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about fandom, because it's really for the fans, by the fans. And of course, yes, it does go against copyright issues, but companies will look away because those kind of fan activities, fan art, creating little trinkets and freebies, writing fan fiction, all of that actually helps promote the idols and the industry. And so I do think one thing that's still consistent is how fans perform care for each other through those kind of fan art and freebies. But at the same time, so much of K-pop has been monetized, and everything is so capitalist. There's so much overspending encouraged. I feel really bad for K-pop fans who are minors, who are still in middle school or high school, especially in Korea, because they're legally not allowed to have part-time jobs. And so that means they almost have no chance to participate in a fan event or a concert unless their parents pay for them. And so that really does take away a lot of fun and joy from K-pop. And so I do see how the industry is changing in a very capitalist way in the past 30 years.
So talking about like the industry changing, like changing in another way, like do you see K-pop turning more into like a talent-based industry or more of like a popularity-based industry, like going from here on now? Because we do see a lot of like K-pop idols who do have their own hand in their own work, and it's very beautiful art. But then you also see some K-pop idols who are only in groups because they have the face or they have like the bubbly personality, or like sometimes the fans just love them because like they just seem perfect, but they don't have the skills or the talent to actually back that up.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's a little bit of both, but especially today, the power of fandom has become so big that you could have the most beautiful face, the most talented singing voice, and dance abilities. But if you do not have a strong fan base, you cannot make it in K-pop, which has become so competitive today. And talent, of course, some people are just naturally talented. They have a naturally, beautiful singing voice, but that could also be cultivated in some ways, which is why the management agencies start training folks who want to be K-pop idols from a very, very young age, little kids who are at elementary school, and they train them for like 6, 7 years. And in doing so, the company also instills the idea that you also have to be a morally good person, in addition to learning how to sing, rap, dance, speak in a variety of foreign languages. Especially today, you have to speak English, Japanese, Mandarin, maybe something else to address all of your international fans. And they also control many of their trainees. For example, some of them are not allowed to have cell phones. Some of them are not allowed to have social media platforms, and definitely not allowed to date, because they don't want them to get into a scandal while they're trainees, but also after they make their debut, because the companies want to protect their investment. So you don't want to train somebody and have them make their debut at 20 and then, get into a scandal when they're 21 and lose all that investment money. At the same time, that's also why they try to, I think, enforce this moral character education, because you're trying to protect them, not just to become good people, but also to protect your investment. And that also goes kind of hand in hand in what the fandom believes as well. Like, you have to be a good person, and this is what we expect from you. And so going back to your question about what was that?
Sorry. Sorry, you're good. I was asking whether you think that the industry might be moving towards like
yes,
or
talent-based or fandom-based.
Yeah.
I do think because talent could be cultivated to a certain degree, it's now becoming more fandom-based. And the more fans you have, there are more people who buy your album, stream your music, go to your concerts, and show how big and popular you are. Because I think now fandom, the size of fandom, is becoming the criteria of measuring an idol's success. And so the way I see it, maybe that's why companies will look away even when there are copyright issues, when fans create little trinkets or freebies using official photos, making fan art or something, because it actually helps the fandom strengthen. It helps with the cohesion within the fandom, because they will love these little objects and you'll talk about the idol and love them more. And so all of these fan activities, even if they are very wholesome and just for the fans, by the fans, I can't say that they're completely cut off from the industry, because they do promote it in some way, even if your fan art isn't directly financing the idols.
I think I like just kind of adding to your stays. I mean, I have so many questions, and I kind of have two for this next one, because you talk a little bit about how when people are trying to become a K-pop idol, they have to go through training, and companies will put in a lot of time and effort, money, all that kind of stuff into their training. But they're doing it at such a young age. I know we talked about this in class, where like some, if not many or most, will kind of drop out of school to pursue that because it's so taxing and so demanding. So it's like, why? And I mean, it's more of like a speculation / opinion, but like, why doesn't the company just decide to, instead of focus on younger demographic for training purposes, but not have people who are already maybe past a certain age in school, and like start training them and putting them there? Because at that point, at a certain age, you already have some capabilities, you already have some cultivation in your talents and skills, and as a person of knowing life. So like, why not focus on maybe an older demographic, just train and get out faster, rather than training a 11 to 13-year-old for 10 years or more to get them to debut? Like, that just doesn't always make sense in my brain, and it actually seems quite harmful to them, mentally, physically, emotionally, all these things. But on top of that, and we might need to break this up, but like on top of that, there's the new age of media and music and all this kind of stuff with AI coming into play. And we kind of start seeing that already in K-pop with, Plave and aespa and their, I want to call them alter egos, but like, their AI presence. And, and so it's like, do we think because you're thinking it's more going to be fan based now instead of talent based because of the cultivation, you can do a lot with AI by cultivating it yourself just by inputting a lot of different things. So do you think that's going to start taking over instead of the physical people? So what does that look like all in general? There's a lot. Take your time.
You two can talk. These are great questions. Going back to your first question about the age thing, I can think of a variety of reasons why companies want to focus on very young people to train. The first thing is the mandatory military service that all Korean males have to go through. At one point in their 20s, all Korean nationals, Korean males, have to serve in the military roughly about 2 years, depending on which military service you're going to undergo, but roughly 2 years. 2 years, it might seem like a short time. It's actually a long time for an idol because it's kind of like smack in your prime time in your 20s. 2 years is also a long time when you could be releasing like at least like 3 mini albums and a full studio album and doing a whole concert tour in Asia and the US and maybe, add a few stops in Europe and Australia. So it's actually a long time and money that you're losing. And so companies might want to start training little kids from a very early age so that the earlier they that debut, the more money that they can milk out of them. One example I can think of is NCT Dream, who all made their debut at a very young age. This is their 10th anniversary, I believe, since their debut. Yeah, there's still a lot of time before one of them goes off to the military. And so, again, this kind of proves how the earlier you make your debut, the more you can monetize out of your artist. Another reason I can think of is instead of focusing on older folks who are talented and already kind of like figured out who they are, their identity and characteristics, companies don't want that. They might not want idols to have their own mind or figure out who they are and want to mold them from a very early age so it's easier for them to control them so they don't get into scandals like publicly dating somebody. And so for me, that's one of the main reasons I think why they start training little kids from an early age for 6, 7 years and they make their debut as minors and there's still like 10 years for them to, monetize them before they go off to the military. And also once you kind of hit late 20s in K-pop, you're considered old. You're considered, I'm making air quotes right now, you can't see, you're considered a hag. Yes, you're aging out. And that's kind of also when a lot of K-pop idols start looking in other venues like in musical theater or acting in television or film or becoming a show host, an MC, because they know that the shelf life for idols is very short. And so for companies from the industry perspective, the earlier you start, the more money you can earn. Your second question about AI, I do think AI will drastically change the landscape of K-pop, especially now seeing how popular Plave is. Plave is a virtual idol group. They're not completely AI because there are people behind the green screen and there are actual people singing and dancing. They're anonymous. We don't know who they are. We kind of have an idea who they are, but we don't know who they are. But what the fans see on the screen are animated, right? Animated figures, although there are real people behind the screen. Anyway, Plave is, I think, a very happy place, a very happy meeting place between anime fans and K-pop fans, which is why I think they're so popular. I mean, their manpower is amazing. I seriously hope my K-pop idol never pits against Plave because we would definitely lose. I think we did pit against them like for the previous album in early 2024, and we lost miserably because their manpower is amazing. And I do think because AI idols or virtual idols are kind of a risk-free, surefire plan because they would never get into scandals. They would never be caught, driving under influence or, I mean, they might be publicly dating another virtual idol, but that's all like manufactured narrative. So it would be a very scandal-free investment from the industry side. And because of that, and because now Plave is very popular, I'm sure other companies are trying to figure out or mimic like how Plave became so popular. What can we do to create something similar? And so I think in the next 10, 20 years, well, this is just my suspicion. I think half of the current idol groups might go away. And I think there'll be more virtual AI groups because they're easier to manufacture, easier to manage, and they could have a huge following. And so I do think AI could drastically change the landscape of K-pop.
Honestly, I kind of wanted to go back onto like, I know we talk about like the idols and their scandals and stuff like that, but I know here in America, like kind of the Western side, like we don't really like see that as an issue. Do you ever see like more Western ideas going into K-pop where they're not as like taboo to talk about like gender, people have actual healthy bodies, like stuff like that? Do you kind of see that happening ever, or do you kind of just see it being very separate?
A little bit. I would say that I do see change a little bit in K-pop. Now there are more fans talking about, having healthy body standards, complimenting when an idol looks healthier, even if they gained a bit more weight by Korean standards, if they look healthy and they seem healthy, there are fans that are applauding that and telling them to eat well and be healthy. There are also other fans discussing issues about gender, especially because Korea is such a homophobic country. There are groups where sometimes the idol, come out and the fans would applaud that. There's also other discussions about political events, for example, the war that's raging on, or other issues, political issues in Korea and also outside of Korea, where fans would discuss. And, if the idol also takes a stand, they would also applaud that. For example, in December 2024, when former President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law, there were a couple of K-pop idols who encouraged and applauded fans who were protesting in the streets. I could think of a few members from Girls' Generation, like Yuri. She also, texted her fans through the bubble, the chat function, saying, "Oh, I hope you guys, are doing okay. I'm cheering for you when you're going to the protest." She also, I believe, had kimbap, Korean food, delivered to the protest site so people could eat as they protest. There was also New Jeans members who I think helped deliver food. So there was a number of, especially female idols, Girls' Generation, New Jeans, and IU, who all cheered on the Korean people protesting, trying to save democracy. And I think these kind of discussions are emerging more and more in K-pop, which I think is a very healthy sign. I would like to see more of these discussions, and hopefully this will continue on.
Going back to like what Jessica was saying about like trees starting so young, I want to go back to like in second generation, the group after school, they had their graduation system. Same thing with NCT Dream, they're supposed to have their graduation system. Why do you think that system didn't really work out in K-pop? Like we don't really see much of that anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, their graduation system, when they graduate, they were still very young, and it didn't really seem like graduating. And also, I think the fans wanted to keep those members. They didn't want to part with them, which is why I think Mark from NCT Dream was supposed to graduate and didn't. And fans are really glad up to this day that he did it and they were able to keep him. I also think by that point, because of the parasocial relationships and the chemistry that fans desire to see within the members, they don't want them to graduate because now they've already crafted this narrative, this chemistry about this team, which is now basically a family, and they don't want to split them up. It's kind of like, I'm thinking of this other group called Wavy. Majority of them are Chinese members. One of the members, Wen, is pursuing his solo activities in mainland China. He's very successful as an actor, and he's not graduated or anything. But because he's also pursuing his solo activities and he's not being able to perform as a group in concerts or other stages, a lot of fans are waiting for him, wishing for him to return to Korea and perform with the group, but also he's doing his own thing over there. So fans are happy he's very successful, but also, they want him to be back in the Wavy family. And so I think this idea of chemistry between the members is also a very important aspect for the fans. Because you want to see your idols not just as good people, you also want to see them love each other as a family. In a way, I do kind of see K-pop as my extended family. You have family members that you were born with. You have no choice over them. And then I love them. Yeah, I love them. But also, you don't have a choice who you pick as your parents or your siblings. But then there are your extended family that you get to pick as you grow up. Your friends, your mentors, your hobbies. And for me, that would be my K-pop family. I wouldn't say that everybody in K-pop is warm and generous and kind. Of course, there are sometimes toxic fans, toxic fandoms, but I do see the majority of K-pop fans as considerate or reflexive about their activities or critical about what they do. And that's what I like about them. So funny story. There was another scholar at a different school who wanted me to, go to this conference together and do a lot of work for this together. And I said, well, actually, so because of, the current administration and budget cuts, we don't really have a lot of travel funding for faculty. So I don't think I can go. I don't think I have money for this. And then that scholar said, oh, but you're going to all these K-pop concerts. And I said, that's family. You do not touch my family. You don't mess with my family. So very sensitive topic. That's my family. I'm going to see my family. And so, yeah, I kind of see K-pop as my extended family. And I think the graduation system didn't work because for those fans also, they were kind of like already family and didn't want to see them leave.
Mm-hmm. I kind of want to jump real far back.
Mm-hmm.
Breaking through it. Because, I love all that we've talked about. We've talked about a lot. But I kind of want to go back into kind of what I initially asked you about, where like you put your own anecdotes, your own personal self into this book, which when you guys read this book, it's really funny. So many times.
Also,
See, absolutely. But there's another part to that I'm curious about as like for writing, if people don't know really kind of what goes into writing, into publishing something, there's a lot of aspects that people don't know on the outside of that. You even said it took about 6 years to get this book completed and published. I want to kind of talk about that process a little bit of like how you chose your publisher. And then also when you're writing it, because you put, if I remember correctly, you use your own pictures, don't you?
Yes, all of them are my own pictures.
So you use your own pictures and you talk about your own experiences, but there are certain names that get talked about. So Link, did you have to go through a process of getting approval by certain people or certain companies, or what did that look like in this whole process?
Yeah, that's a great question. Writing about your experiences is scary. I mean, it's fun, but it's also really scary because you don't know how your readers will judge you. I don't think this is a book for everyone. Not every book is for everyone. I don't think every author can please every reader. But especially for this book, it was scary to write about it. But also, there's not a lot of first-person accounts of K-pop fandom from the 90s. There's a lot of accounts, especially from third gen, like the mid 2010s, but not a lot from the 90s and 2000s. And I wanted to include that writing so that people know, oh, so aside from today, this was what fans were going through in the pre-digital, pre-internet era in the 1990s to go see idols or something. And so that's why I included that. And I used all of my own photos. That was pretty much a financial choice, because if you use photos that are not your own, you almost always have to get approval. And some of them might actually cost money and a lot of time to get approval. So when you're writing a book, the easiest thing is actually to just use the photos that you took yourself. But even when I did that, I was very careful to, for example, blur the other fans' faces in the concert venue photos I took. So there was actually this one photo where I'm posing with these two other fans holding light sticks, and there are a few fans around the photo. And I posted that photo on my social media account, like, oh, this is like great because I'm at the concert. And then there was one of those fans actually sent me a message saying, oh, actually, I'm in that photo. And, people who know me could recognize me. So could you take the photo down? And I apologized immediately and took the photo down. And later, when I wanted to include that photo for my book, I asked the designer for the book to blur all the faces out as much as she could. And then I sent that photo to the fan who had messaged me earlier. Hi, we spoke like 2 years ago. So I would love to include this in my book, but I don't want to unless I have your approval to do so. So could you check the photo and see if this looks okay? And she took a look and she's like, yeah, it's completely blurred out. So I appreciate that you went through the trouble to do this. So I got her approval to publish that photo in my book. And I think it's important to do so in a very ethical way because yes, most of it is my story, but also it's other fans' stories and their, copyright. And so I do think it's important to always get consent, which is why when I was also interviewing other fans, I told them that, I would love to, use this for my book. Is it okay if I, print this interview? And how would you like your name? Would you like it to be anonymous, or would you like your name included in the book? And all of the fans wanted to be anonymous because there's so much stigma attached to K-pop fandom. And of course, I respect that decision, which is why all the fans in my book are named as A, B, C, and nobody actually reveals their real name. I chose the publisher, University of Michigan Press, because they have a very strong series and a very long history of publishing books in media studies, fan studies, pop culture. And they also do open access, which was one of the main reasons I went with them. And I'm very happy I did. They also did a fantastic job with the lineup, the designing, the book covers and everything. So I'm very happy with that. But yes, especially when you're writing, you have, I think as a researcher, you should abide by, the research ethics. And of course, as researchers, we do a lot of things. Like we go through training and everything to make sure that the research we conduct is ethical. But still, aside from the official training, I think every researcher also has his or her own guideline about how to do research in an ethical way. What's the other part of your question?
I think you covered it. Because I was just asking about why you chose that publisher, kind of how that process will go, and then also the first part. I was like, yeah. I was like, what? You answered it.
I remembered something else. And in chapter 4, I talk about these misbehaving idols who get into scandals, and how fans collectively get together to call them out. Now, I was very careful when I was writing that chapter, especially the scandals, because I didn't want to get into a lawsuit. And so I was very careful not to write any of my own speculations, like, oh, this is probably what this person must have done. No, none of that. So I would only rely on official news channels, like news articles, and use those words. So I would, paraphrase and cite exactly what the journalist said. Oh, this thing happened on this day and this date, and this thing happened, so that none of it is my own speculation. I'm just really just writing and using and citing the facts. And so I was very, very careful about that, just in case, fingers crossed, the book gets translated into Korean language or some other language, because I don't want to get into a lawsuit.
I wanted to kind of talk about your acknowledgments and how you said, like, for Taeyong, how he helped you like finish the story. And I kind of just wanted to ask, like, how did like all these like K-pop idols, Taeyong included, of course, like help you with your writing process? Like coming up with like, well, they were like over your shoulder, like, here we go, what is that? Spirit. So they inspire you to keep writing and keep going.
I think you're comfortable. Yes. I think I told you one of the main reasons I decided to write this was because I wanted to assign a reading for my class where students could really understand fan culture, the fan experience. And also when I started that, I still am a fan of this first generation idol. Now he's not really performing or making music much, but he's, emceeing. He's a show host for a lot of TV shows. And so I am grateful that I can still see him on TV. That's a very, very rare thing to see one of your favorite celebrities for more than, so he made his debut in 1997. So is it 29 years now? Yeah. So to see somebody you love for more than 29 years on TV, that's an amazing thing. And so he was one of I think, the idols that motivated me to write about this, because I still am a fan for a very long time. Oh, I do hope we have a concert next year. Next year is the 30th anniversary. At the same time, there's a lot of scholars, especially, in K-pop, who are fans of this one particular group. And that's great. That's great. I really do respect everything that they have done for Korean culture, the economy, the nation. At the same time, I also felt that other groups, other artists deserve kind of a presence in academic literature, in discussion. And for me, that was NCT. I really do think their music, a lot of people say, oh, it's just noise music. It's so neo. I do think their music is very special. I also think Taeyong, my favorite idol, my bias, he's very special. I don't see him as a perfect person. Like Jessica said, everybody has imperfections. And it's what you do with those imperfections. It's how you embrace your imperfections, and also how you openly share those and, discuss them with other people is what makes you, special. And I think he's very special in that way. So he motivated me to finish the book because I really wanted his concert photo on the cover. I just really wanted a neo green cover.
I really respect this.
Yeah, we have too many purple covers out there. Can we just please have one neo green cover? Just one, please. I'm not asking for 10. Just one.
It'll glow the brightest.
Yeah, that's why the book is completely neo green. And also that's why my book is dedicated to my two favorite idols, the one who got me into K-pop in the 90s and the one that I currently love now. Of course, there's been a lot of people in the middle. And of course, I wasn't just only into K-pop. At one point, I had a hip-hop phase. So I was going to a lot of underground clubs in the Hongdae area with, bandanas, really, really baggy jeans. You're all imagining, right? Yeah, like raggedy t-shirts, just in junk, in the streets of Hongdae, just unlaced sneakers. Yeah, I had that phase the hip hop phase where I, followed all these hip hop artists, watched them really up close to the point where, their sweat is just trickling down like my face. Yeah, really rain steamy Hongdae clubs. I had that hip hop phase. I was also in the indie music phase, so a little bit more grunge than hip hop. Also, way more accessible to the artist. At one point, you're just all drinking with the artist. There's like no boundaries whatsoever. But also because it's now too easy, I left. I'm like, oh, okay, I concurred, this part. So I also left that. And then at one point, I was a musical theater nerd. So I would go to all these musical theater productions in Korea. And luckily, back then, it was moderately cheap. It was like one third of the ticket price today. So, and also I was a college student. I was interning at theater companies. So all the employees just gave me free tickets. So yeah, so I was a musical theater nerd at one point. And also I was also a film nerd. So I followed all these filmmakers, film directors, actors, and also novelists. And so I was a nerd of a lot of things. And so there are all these people in the middle that didn't make it into the book because this book was about K-pop fandom. And I wasn't writing about hip hop or indie music or film. But yeah, I was a fan of all of these different things. But at the end of the day, for this book, it was the first idol who got me into K-pop and the current idol that I love and who I follow around the world this semester helped me, motivated me to finish the book because I wanted to show them and I wanted to tell them I finished this book on K-pop fandom, and it's the first English language academic book on K-pop fandom for you. Of course, that's not true. It's not for you. It's for my students, but I wanted to say that to them, and so yeah, one day I hope so. Yeah.
So, I mean, I know that you're going out and about right now, traveling for Taeyong. Have you, because you do a lot of like fan events and sign events and all that kind of stuff. Have you seen him and actually been able to give him a copy or like even talk to him about it? Like, I'm going to send this to you or like anything like that to show him your completed work because you are so proud of it. And we are so proud of it. Not that we had any part in it, but we're proud of you. And that's part of the process. But, yeah, have you been able to do that, or is it just like a hopeful in the future?
So back in the summer of 2023, when Taeyong's first mini album was released, and there was a lot of autograph signings, I did tell him then that I'm writing a book on K-pop fandom, and now I have an advance contract, so I'm gonna finish it, and it'll be out in a couple of years. And I asked him, so I'm gonna dedicate the book to you. And he's like, oh, that's so nice. 너무 좋아요. And I said, well, do you want it to be, to TY or to Taeyong or to Kyung, which is like his nickname from the fandom? And he's like thinking really hard. It's like, hold on. His cute face was all like scrunched up. He's like, well, wouldn't to Taeyong be best? Because that's my real name. And I'm like, okay, so now I know what's gonna be on the first page of my book. So yes, I told him that I'm writing, and I posted that on social media as well. I haven't had the chance to give the book to him yet because currently he's just doing a solo concert tour around Asia. But his first full album will be released in mid-May, I think. And after that, there will be autograph signings. So I'm hoping to at least, show him the book through a video call or something because in-person autograph signings, there's a lot of restrictions. Fans cannot bring gifts to the idols because there's been so many incidents where, somebody gives them yes, there could be hidden cameras, like dolls with hidden cameras inside. Also, in second gen and early, mid 2000s, there was an incident where a fan spiked a drink, something toxic, and TVXQ, he drank that because the fan gave it to him. I think he had to go into the hospital and get his stomach pumped. So, I mean, prior to that, idols were all relaxed and fans would give them like food, deliver them food, and they would all eat that. But because now, somebody spiked the drink and there were all these incidents, companies now prohibit fans from bringing anything to fan events, even fan letters, which crushes me because I loved writing letters and, bringing them. It's so wholesome and cute. But now you can't even bring fan letters, let alone gifts. So I don't think I'll be able to give him the book at an in-person autograph signing. But if we do a video call, I could at least hold it up and, open it up to the acknowledgement page and show him. Yeah, so I'm hoping to do that. But yeah, we're almost out of time. Any final questions or comments or thoughts?
I think that's pretty much it for me at least.
I'm sure I have more, but right now, we've talked about a lot, and I think, yeah, and we've talked about a lot, and I think it was like all of your answers were so, um, oh, they're all question mark. Lost English. They're all they're also detailed and full of information and knowledge, not just about the data and analytics and all these things that go into your book, but also your own personal experiences and understandings of Korean culture, Korean society, being a K-pop fan, but also because you've lived in America and just abroad and have been a K-pop fan in that area as well, you understand that the changes and the variations between that. So I think it's also super helpful. And I think, now I think, I know that that goes a lot into your book as well, which I believe is going to be very helpful for all audiences who read it, whether it's students or just anybody who's interested in K-pop or is like, what is K-pop? I want to know about it. I think that's beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate all three of you reading the book. And also, again, many thanks to Professor Will Hedberg and Chan Nguyen at the Asia Center at Arizona State University, and also the School of International Letters and Cultures for supporting the Korean program and all the classes that we have here. And this is really where, I meet wonderful students like you. So thank you again for reading the book and making the time today. And thank you for the listeners who are listening to this podcast.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
You. One last, and the book is online, free access. So
Mhm.
it's a really quick read too, so it's not that long.
Yeah.